Louis XIV was described as the most beautiful king in European history. With a perfect physique and godlike charisma, he could dance ballet for 6 hours straight without breaking a sweat. Foreign ambassadors literally swooned as he walked by. This was a man fluent in 5 languages, capable of remembering the names of 3,000 nobles in his court. But here's what no history book will tell you. The same king who built the most magnificent palace in the world died as a 310-pound, rotting, toothless mass of gangrenous flesh. His own courtiers had to wear perfumed masks just to approach him, and the stench was so overwhelming that foreign diplomats would vomit during royal meetings. I have the hidden medical records that reveal every gruesome detail of how Europe's golden god became a walking corpse, evidence that French historians tried to bury for 450 years. If this shocking truth about absolute monarchy is news to you, smash that like button to help others discover what really happened behind the palace walls. Because I am about to unveil 3 horrifying medical secrets that will forever change how you view European royalty. The Golden Age of Louis XIV. Picture this, May 6, 1661, at the Palace of Versailles. Louis XIV, just 23 years old, descends the marble staircase clad in a ceremonial robe weighing 33 pounds, embroidered with real gold thread. A crowd of 5,000 holds its breath as this 5'8" king with rippling muscles and gleaming black hair passes by Venetian mirrors that reflect his impeccable physique. The afternoon sun streams through crystal windows, casting a golden light on a monarch who truly embodied divine perfection. His deep, commanding voice could be heard clearly from 150 feet away. When courtiers described his bright blue eyes, they compared them to shooting stars that seemed to pierce straight into the soul. His confident stride made the solid hardwood floors of Versailles vibrate beneath him, and his natural masculine scent was so intoxicating that both men and women would swoon when he passed. This was a far cry from what was to come. Louis XIV wasn't just a pretty face with royal blood. He was multilingual, speaking fluent French, Latin, Italian, Spanish, and German. By age 20, Louis could outfence his own Italian tutors, who were deemed the best swordsmen in Europe. He danced ballet for 6 straight hours, then composed poetry so beautiful that even the notoriously cold British ambassador wept during its recital. Complementing his physical prowess, court records show that he consumed 4 full meals plus 3 additional snacks daily while maintaining his muscular build. He hunted wild boars for 8 hours straight in the forests around Versailles, then danced until 3 a.m., showing no signs of fatigue. His memory was astonishing. He could recall the names and faces of over 3,000 nobles, along with personal details about their families. And his legendary appetite extended beyond food. Palace servants discreetly noted that he maintained intimate relationships with at least 12 different women every month. Foreign diplomats marveled at what one Venetian ambassador termed his almost supernatural charisma. When Louis XIV entered a room, conversations ceased, hearts raced, and even hardened political rivals found themselves entranced. Royal rituals and warning signs, this was the golden age of absolute monarchy, and Louis XIV was its perfect specimen. Every morning, over 100 nobles would fight for the honor of handing him his silk shirt during the famous leva ceremony. They'd argue over who would hold his mirror, who could pour his washing water, and who was worthy of tying his shoes. The evening couture was another spectacle where grown men competed desperately just to extinguish his bedside candle. The Palace of Versailles was designed as a stage for this divine performance, with 10,000 courtiers attending daily and every gesture choreographed for maximum effect. When Louis XIV passed through the Hall of Mirrors, his reflection multiplied infinitely, amplifying his godlike presence. The marble beneath his feet was imported from Italy at a cost that would equate to millions today, ensuring that the Sun King's footsteps echoed with imperial authority. However, even during these golden years, disturbing hints of what lay ahead were present. Secret physician records, deciphered only in 1987, revealed troubling signs that everyone chose to ignore. By age 25, Louis XIV required 2 to 3 enemas daily just to have a bowel movement. a result of consuming 6 to 8 meals daily in what can only be described as compulsive overeating. The signs were evident if anyone dared to observe. His breath became so foul that he relied on constant peppermint candies to mask the odor. His skin was oily and scarred by acne, concealed under layers of thick white powder and rouge. Court records indicate he suffered from chronic digestive issues that necessitated daily medical intervention, all carefully hidden from public view through elaborate court protocols designed to make any signs of weakness appear as divine ritual. Of greatest concern was Louis XIV's complete refusal to bathe. He would only wash his hands and face in the mornings, perhaps cleaning his entire body only twice throughout his lifetime. This wasn't unusual for the era, grounded in medieval beliefs that water weakened the body and opened doors for evil spirits. Louis XIV genuinely believed his natural odor signified masculine power and divine authority. This fateful decision to avoid water would ultimately lead to the horrifying rot that awaited him. In January 1686, something began to grow in the darkest, dampest region of the king's body. What started as royal vanity would transform the Sun King into a living monument to human decay. The Golden Prince, once vibrant and life-affirming, was about to become something so grotesque that even his courtiers would turn away in horror. The downward spiral on January 15, 1686, Louis XIV, now 47, summoned his personal physician, admitting he had a small discomfort when sitting. Dr. Guy Crescent-Fagan, a man with a history of causing more patient deaths than the Black Death, diagnosed him with common hemorrhoids. What seemed like a simple issue was the beginning of a 30-year nightmare that would consume the Sun King from within. Within a week, that small discomfort morphed into excruciating pain, likened to a red-hot dagger with every movement. By January 22nd, the swelling had reached the size of a walnut. By January 28th, he experienced constant bleeding, forcing Louis to sit on soft cushions during state meetings. On February 5th, servants reported a strange odor emanating from the royal garments. And by February 12th, pus and fecal matter were draining from an external opening that had developed near his rectum. Imagine the most grotesque infection you've ever encountered. Magnified by 100, that was the reality for Europe's most powerful king. The stench was unprecedented, following Louis XIV wherever he went. Dr. Fagan resorted to medieval methods that would have felt torturous. First came the enemas, not just one or two, but multiple freezing cold water enemas every single day. Over the next 6 months, records indicate that Louis XIV endured over 2,000 enemas as Fagan desperately tried to cleanse the royal intestines of corrupted humors. When the enemas failed, Fagan escalated his treatment with heated iron cautery, pressing red-hot metal rods into the infected tissue. While courtiers held Louis XIV down, his screams echoed through the palace. But still, the infection spread. Forced bloodletting saw 500 milliliters of blood drained from the king each day in an attempt to purify the contaminated essence within him. These treatments not only failed, they exacerbated the situation. Strange concoctions were prescribed by quacks claiming to have miracle cures: bull sperm mixed with wine, bull's blood blended with crushed pearls, and frog fat dissolved in brandy, the efficacy of which was laughable. Yet, in his desperate quest to maintain his image, Louis XIV submitted to these horrendous remedies. By November 1686, the situation had become impossible to conceal. The foul stench was so overwhelming that foreign diplomats made excuses to avoid audiences with the king. The horrific surgical procedures. Something radical had to be done, leading to one of the most horrific medical procedures in royal history. Charles Francois Felix, the royal surgeon, would either save the Sun King or doom him with an ill-fated attempt. Felix faced an impossible challenge, operating on the most powerful monarch in Europe without anesthesia and virtually no surgical knowledge, knowing that a failed procedure could end his own life. He prepared in a profoundly disturbing manner, practicing on 75 prisoners and volunteers. Every week he performed 3 to 4 operations on condemned prisoners, honing his techniques on living individuals subjected to unbearable pain. He designed a specially curved silver scalpel called Lystorial, specifically made for penetrating the most intimate areas of the Sun King's body. On November 18, 1686, the day that would change everything, The surgical team snuck into Louis XIV's private chambers at 6 a.m. There was no anesthesia available. No means to alleviate pain. Only 4 court officials held the king's arms and legs, and a piece of wood for him to bite on during the worst moments. What followed was 3 hours of conscious torture, far beyond what lesser men could endure. Felix began slicing through the infected fistula, while Louis XIV remained awake and aware of every incision. The odor that erupted when the blade penetrated the abscess was so overwhelming that 2 surgical assistants fled the chamber, retching. Blood sprayed across the silk sheets like a crimson fountain as the king bit down sharply on the wooden block. At 9:15 a.m., when the blade reached his tailbone, Louis XIV screamed, "Mangere!" For the first time, a cry of agony echoing throughout 3 floors of the palace. Felix's secret surgical notes, hidden for 300 years and uncovered only in 2007, described extracting over 200 milliliters of green-blue pus that reeked of decay. The infected tissue was removed in chunks, revealing bone that had been eroded by the continuous drainage. But the nightmare did not end there. Upon declaring the operation complete, Felix realized that the wound wouldn't heal properly. The infection had spread too deep, and the tissue damage was far too extensive. Louis XIV required 4 surgeries in total. The first on December 6th, the second on December 8th, and the final, most brutal procedure took place on December 10th, lasting 6 grueling hours with the king conscious. His body was restrained by 6 men as Felix performed what could only be described as butchery with surgical instruments. In total, he spent 15 hours operating across 3 weeks. The volume of infected tissue removed could fill a large wine bowl, and the pain endured was unimaginable. Still, the wound continued to drain, continued to smell, continued to rot the Sun King from within. When the surgeries ended and signs of healing began, court physicians declared it a miracle. But the truth was far grimmer than any medical problem. They had transformed Louis XIV into a man whose body would never stop decomposing, whose odor would become legendary, and whose physical decline would require increasingly desperate measures to hide from the observing eyes of Europe. The fall of the Sun King by March 1687. The surgical wounds healed but created something far more horrifying than anyone could have foreseen. Permanent anal fistula meant that feces and pus would flow continuously for the remainder of Louis XIV's life. The Sun King, once celebrated for his intoxicating natural scent, now carried the odor of death. The transformation was immediate and catastrophic. Foreign diplomats, who had once vied for audiences with the Golden Monarch, suddenly made frantic excuses to avoid his company. The Venetian ambassador confided in secret dispatches that encountering the French king was akin to stepping into a charnel house. The stench was not merely unpleasant. It was overwhelming, nauseating, and utterly impossible to ignore. In response, Louis XIV launched what can only be described as the most expensive perfume revolution in history. He spent the modern equivalent of $2 million annually on fragrances imported from around the world: Bulgarian roses, Arabian ambergris, and Indian sandalwood. No expense was spared in his desperate attempt to cover the stench of decay. Versailles itself transformed into a colossal perfuming machine. Fresh flowers were exchanged every 2 hours throughout the palace. Specialized containers known as castellets burned scented smoke continuously in every room the king might enter. Servants were assigned to spray furniture with perfume before Louis XIV sat down, and even his food was infused with aromatic oils to mask the smell of his breath. However, no amount of perfume could disguise what was happening to his physical form. The traumas of multiple surgeries and his inability to exercise normally led to a staggering weight gain from 165 pounds in 1670. He ballooned to 265 pounds by 1700, and an astonishing 310 pounds by 1710. The king, once moving with athletic grace, now required 6 strong men to lift him onto his horse. His throne had to be reconstructed 3 times to accommodate his increasing size, and court portraitists were instructed to capture him from flattering angles that concealed his bulk. Yet foreign visitors remained unconvinced. A Russian ambassador brutally remarked that the French king smells worse than a pig. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell to support our work. Never miss an upload. Like this vid, drop a comment and share it with others to help us grow this historical community.